Call the Joint Planning and Finance and Audit Committee meeting to order. You want to just do a roll call real quick, or we just note the roll is here? No one's rules here. And then we have an agenda change, Max.
Yeah, I would move that we move 7A, which is the asset purchase, ahead of item 6. So just to follow item 5. We have, people here that has potential time conflicts. We want to get that.
Do we see any objections to that?
Oh, no objections.
No objections to that? Okay. Seeing no objections from anybody anywhere, we'll move that right over after that. So is there anybody here from the public that wants to speak right now? Okay, seeing no public participation, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last Joint Planning and Finance Audit Committee? Anybody get a chance to read them? I'll move to approve these minutes. Thank you, Hal.
Second.
Perfect. Okay. Approval of the minutes are done. Old business. We're going to go right into the new business, which is going to be 7A. And I'll finish over to Joe to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the packet is an action item that goes over an asset purchase. Over the course of the last 10 months, going back to end of June last year, we've had discussions with family practice about partnering or them coming under Bartlett as an organization. So over the course of the last 10 to 15 to 20 years, depending on where you are in the nation, there has been a consolidation of clinics underneath hospitals, underneath private equity in different systems. So, I mean, this is something that's happened throughout the nation. It's primarily driven due to reimbursement changes from the Medicare. So as that gets reduced more and more, you need a larger and larger percentage to support the overhead at the front of pieces in the future. So with that as a backdrop, me and Alex and Dr. Van had multiple conversations and meetings going back through, I think our first in person was in December. And we've met probably 10 times to discuss the different aspects of how this may look. And so strategically, we think this is a good fit with both organizations and allows family practice to continue to operate much as they do today with not having additional oversight from an organization such as Search. I think they practice much in the same model that Bartlett practices. So it's a good fit from them. It enables us to also transition to a practice. I think Alex talking about retirement in the near term. So recruiting providers into small practices is also a big struggle. A lot of these new doctors are going to systems and either larger clinic groups, private equity groups, second. As we transition into the future, we'll be able to help with the recruitment of providers to replace providers in great retirement as well. It also brings strategic alignment with Bartlett, so we have alignment with the clinic system. So as quality metrics become more and more impactful to our payment methodology, we'll have some relationship with providers that will provide great quality care to make sure we're meeting those metrics. It's always frustrating to get a comment on this when you have metrics that seem to be physician driven, but the hospital is held responsible for them. And so we'll be in that avenue as well. With that, what we've discussed with the small group is that we bring them on, they will be closing their practice, come on to Bartlett as employees of the hospital through the clinic, and then we'll purchase the assets that are within the building. And effectively, one day they'll close their practice, we'll open it under Bartlett's banner with much the same staff and providers. And so patients could expect to receive the same care, into the future as they do this. With those kind of overarching goals, I know there's probably a lot of questions. I just want to go straight to those.
Yeah, let's start with the questions. Kelly.
How long do you expect the transition to take?
There's a couple factors driving it, like medical records, going to be a big one, how fast we can get that transitioned, the asset valuation, if we can get someone to come and do that relatively quick, that would be a driver behind it. So I think I'd estimate about 3 months. It could be shorter, it could be longer, depending on some of the different aspects. Yeah, have started some of the work, such as getting MPIs, talking to insurance companies, some of the stuff that can exist without a group or a doctor. So we've done some background work to help expect. my dream would be to open this, the first business day of July. So ties with our fiscal year.
Yeah, I could ask, how is it going to be branded? Is that clinic still going to be called Family Practice?
No, we can't do that with the transition. We have to change names. So we'll be branded as a Bartlett Clinic. Bartlett Family Medicine is kind of the name we decided on. We want to make sure Bartlett's in the name. We want some of the family practices in the name to show that we go on the exact. So we felt that was a good mix between the two organizations.
Thanks.
I got a few questions, but talk to establishing the contracts with physicians and how that's done.
Well, the way it's done is the first piece is we pull fair market value for the different physicians. We sat down and we met with them. They were able to share, patient volumes, CPT codes, so I can understand what their RVU rate is. These contracts are a little bit different in how we've arranged some agreements. This is how they do it in America down south. You want contracts that are RVU based. So we've done that. And so we went through a full negotiation. That's probably 9 of our 10 meetings was going through the different aspects of what these contracts are. And then these are all vetted by Hall Render on every aspect. So they're legal, I guess, and I don't go to jail. Is that kind of what you're getting at, or is that more?
Yeah.
detailed on that?
Are you in a selling spot? Has that been settled at this point?
We've settled on the contracts.
Okay, great. All right. The strategic value, I guess, you kind of touched on that a little bit, and I guess I'd like to focus on that, maybe the top 3. I think, pharmacy is part of this, 340B.
340B is part of it.
And then, just the value to Bartlett of having these services. I really want a little bit more.
Well, I talked to the value of Bartlett and just the value of the community. I mean, so one of the things, I don't know if everyone's saw an article, and I think it might have been the paper about like how people have lost choice as searches acquired entities. And so our view is this enables patients to continue to have a choice in care that's not outside of searches, I guess, domain. Strategically, there's value in coming to the hospital. So there's payment methodologies we can access that they can't. So what we look at is setting up as a RHC, provider-based RHC, which would give us an increased reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid, which is the predominant payers in the practice. From a farm,
Qualify as Juneau's population qualifies for our RHC stuff
Juneau is considered rural federally.
at 30,000.
It's 50,000.
Is it? Okay. All right. That's great.
And then, I mean, there's several aspects that you have to have a HIPSA, which there is a HIPSA for primary medicine. So it says the federal government says there's 2 to 3 primary care providers short in this area. You have to be in a rural area, which we are, and then we have to have less than 50 beds, which we can. So we can make a provider-based RHC. So it's not as beneficial from the Medicare standpoint it used to be, because they've changed some of the rules, but there is still increased payments from what they receive today. The other piece that we can set up is once they become provider-based to us, every script that the clinic writes could be considered a 340B script. We can set up contract pharmacies, get it set up as a child site. So there's several advantages to that. We provide 340B drugs to the clinic if they're doing any, if there's injections or if they're giving vaccines, stuff like that. But then there's value in the contract pharmacy. So that's something Bartlett's gotten into before. The real benefits comes when you actually have providers of primary care to write the scripts. And so that's kind of the strategic alignment. So as a clinic in a standpoint, I mean, some of the reimbursement, I mean, they still have the same business constraints as they do today, but where it becomes more strategically important to both of us is with those increased reimbursements and how we can then use those dollars to support the clinic and improve care.
That was my third question, is the improving care, and I guess more in terms of the breadth of services. I mean, what will they be able to provide that maybe they can or don't now? I mean, what are your goals here?
I mean, I know they have lab in the clinic and they have imaging in the clinic. They've struggled to staff some of those services in the past. Having those departments in the hospital will have more flexibility around that with staffing. So we have staff that we can co-share. How we set those up is still yet to be determined, whether we make those hospital-based services or clinic-based services. It's going to depend on whether the building meets some requirements. I'll go into the nuances, but it impacts reimbursement between the services. And some of it does is that opens it up for other providers in the community that don't have a home or don't feel like they have a good place to practice, right? And so I think what we have to do is be flexible with some of these providers that either the clinic's been bought by another entity and it's just not a good fit for them, but they don't want to leave Juneau. So can we offer a home where they can come practice, provide good care while staying in Juneau? That makes sense?
That does.
So something that we just have to be flexible to what's out there, I think.
And actually, a response, if I could, Kenny, one last one that, you know, we talked about that forming these, you know, the separate entities to house some other operations and you know, some of the value was kind of lost with the closure of RC and so how will you house this?
In order to get the provider base to get the 340B, we have to have it housed under the hospital.
Have to be housed?
Yeah. The one piece we might be able to carve out will be physicians, but then the benefit, the financial benefit to that is minimized by the additional work that goes into supporting it. Then you have all these contracts for support. And it's just not material for us to put that additional work into it, you know, and compliance oversight, I think.
Maybe I missed what you just said. You're saying it has to be housed within the hospital. You're not talking, are you talking about spatially?
No, I meant legally.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've had conversations about having a 501c3 that the hospital would,
I see.
that we'd house some of these non-cost based entities to increase reimbursement.
So I have a couple questions. One of the things about that I was concerned with when we were looking into this before is being able to, even though it says we're Bartlett Regional Hospital, I know that we've had some issues with the city before about us having offices off campus. Is there any issues with that with the city or anything like that? Have you talked with
I've had-
city law?
I have conversations with Emily. I've had the city managers have had conversations with them. They haven't brought up any issues. And so I feel like I brought them along with this conversation.
I mean, and this is something that I've kind of envisioned for the 7 years I've been on this board, that we're going to be able to rebrand Bartlett to make sure that we have a good footprint all over everywhere in this town. So it's really good to make that easy. I know that in the past we've had city attorneys that have kind of squawked on us moving anything off campus.
Yeah, and I saw some emails that were squawking about moving them outside the CBJ, outside the city and borough area. So like there was some emails about opening services and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of this.
Telehealth is okay, but not physical presence. As care.
So, you know, I don't know if you're ready to give us a number, but is there a price that we're paying for this? And the reason why I'm asking that is, you know, I feel like this board's been burned a couple of times on like opening up a checkbook to build a monstrosity across the street.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that we're, I know that everything's going to be done under fair market value and stuff like that, but things change. So before that it's completely finalized, are we going to have a number that the board can at least understand? And it doesn't have to be today, Joe.
Okay. I mean, there will be, I mean, to be legal, this has to be, the whole thing has to be done through this FMV assessment. So there is a third party that comes in and does it. What we're buying is the desks, the chairs, computers, diagnostic equipment. I have an estimate. I think the number is going to be under. I don't really want to make that public because I'm way off.
Well, what makes this different too, I'd say, is that we're talking about personal property. I mean, we already own the building, right? So,
We're on the
I mean,
building.
it's a little bit more straightforward from that
And
standpoint.
really what we need to, the board needs to approve is the asset purchase, which I just don't know which pieces become capital assets. Some of these are operating expenses, right? Like a chair is not a capital asset. Desks aren't capital asset. Those are operating expenses. Like I bought new chairs the other day. I can buy chairs down there.
But are we buying, you know, and I don't know if I completely understand this. So are we buying the practice to move the patients? I mean, how does that?
So what we're buying is the physical assets. And so, you know, in conversations with our lawyer, that's what the way they recommend doing any of these transactions, because there's no goodwill attributed to like buying a medical record or buying something, an intangible asset. That's where we get opened up to risk. So this is physical assets. So in practically speaking, they'll close their practice, they'll run out their AR, they'll close down their entity while we start our entity and start the ramp up process. So there'll be a short period of time where technically we're running at the same time. They won't be practicing in that, but they'll have to do all their billing and all their collections and stuff as that entity.
Right. So like you say, June 30th, they're done. Then they close their books out, which might take another 6 months.
Yeah.
But from July 1st, it's us billing, not them.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I'm completely understanding this. So when we buy, we're not buying a practice. We're just buying physical assets. Besides
That's chairs, computers.
desk chairs, computers, stuff like that. And because their patient base, we cannot buy that.
No, there'll be some communication with the patient base. One thing that we can do is we can have a document that passes the records to us. We become custodians and responsible for releases of information, stuff like that. And that's perfectly acceptable practice. And some of the letters the patients will get, they will have a choice to reestablish care with Bartlett, or they can go to any of the other providers in town. There's always a choice.
And their liability, are we taking on any of that liability at all?
No, and that's why we're doing this way. I mean, it's a clean line between, there's some things that would transfer over, there's that we can't get away from, like FEMLA is one thing that transfers in this kind of arrangement, but that's the only thing that lawyers have brought up. So if they have anyone that's worked a certain period of time, basically that work history would count for their first year for the FEMLA or AFLA.
So I just want to kind of skip over because I was part of the 340B debacle last time here.
Yeah.
So just making sure that of course, understanding it completely 100%. So if we have physicians that are working under the Bartlett umbrella, even though they're off campus and they're writing prescriptions, they will still, if they're an employee of Bartlett, will still fall under the 340B program.
It's a little bit more complicated than that. We have to get, once it's provider based, we go through HRSA, designated as a child site and listed on, and that's when it becomes applicable. There's some timing around.
Yeah, what's the timing on something like that?
It's changed since COVID. It used to be that it only had a single open enrollment period during the year, which was like in September, and then you became effective January 1st.
Mhm.
It's, last I checked, it was open to almost, it's a 3-month turnaround now. You can apply anytime. It just takes 3 months.
So that would be, so all of the physicians there, Alex, I'm not sure, you have three internists there, and then you have some
2 internists down there.
3 doctors and 1 nurse practitioner.
nurse practitioners. So all 4 of those physicians or advanced practitioner, they all fall under the 340B program, correct?
That's where I'm running. Sure.
So that any other physician we would be able to hire, we'd be able to put them back in the 340B
Yeah,
program.
it's the entity that becomes enrolled, and then every employed provider, once you're enrolled, it falls underneath that. And there's some,
I mean, the 340B entity would be Bartlett.
Yeah.
In this case, yeah.
Bartlett is 340B, and we do 340B today. It's just designating something as a child site. And it has to be a provider-based clinic. That's why that designation is important for us.
Which is huge. I don't have a question. Anybody else have any? Dr. Astor?
I just, from a political perspective, sometimes in the past, Alex has been here a long time. And so many people have been here a long time. And when the hospital can compete with other practices, sometimes that would create consternation amongst the medical staff. But there's been some groundwork laid. Joe had talked to all the other providers, the other big groups in town that might get a little worried about something like this. And I've heard nothing. I have heard general support. And Alex, I see nodding his head. So I think that's great. So the positives are significant, keeping good doctors in the community, having a place to put orphans and things like that. And then the fact that the downs, I don't really see the downside from a medical staff perspective. So I think medical staff.
That's really good, Dr. Astor, because I remember us just kind of wanting to hire a child practitioner just to work.
Mhm.
And there was big consternation, especially from the other group. And that was really kind of, I didn't want to go into that fight. So I know Joe's done a lot of legwork and background work to make sure that didn't happen this time. So I'm happy to hear you say that.
Well, Joe, maybe let's just put that on the table. You talked with physicians over at Valley Medical about this.
Well, I had some initial conversations with, well, right after Southeast Medical was acquired by Surge, I did some conversations with some of the independent practitioners. Like I talked to Dr. Dressel, I talked to Luke Mather. And then as we made this public, I did a phone call to make sure he was aware and was looped in. Valley's the biggest, independent out there for public practice.
Sure. And their take on it is,
He understood. Doctors, he wish it could be just stay the way it was, but he understands like this is the best way forward for this organization and for the setup. So he understands why.
Letterman has his hand up.
Chris.
Thank you for that. I just want to go back to what Kenny was mentioning, and thank you, Kenny, for bringing it up the way that you did, that this request is just to purchase the assets of the practice as it exists today. My question around that is, and I think I'm pretty clear that that is truly what this is. Is there a second effort that's necessary from a board action to begin practicing, to actually institute this other practice under the hospital's umbrella? Is that clear? Do I need to explain that?
I understand your question. And just looking at past practice, I mean, we've opened clinics, we've hired doctors in the past without board approval. So I was under the assumption, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's within my purview to hire doctors to provide care within the CBJ.
I would agree with that. I think that, I guess, Chris, what I would respond is that we do need to approve the asset acquisition. And I would say, irrespective of the book treatment of whether it's an expense or capital item, any assets that are covered under this asset evaluation study that's going to be done as part of this, that number is what we have to approve. And then the book treatment is separate from that. But as far as the opening of the clinic and doing all that, I think, that's the CEO's purview, I guess, is my take on it.
And I have to agree with Max on that too. For Joe to be able to negotiate contracts with any physician, that's the CEO's responsibility, not ours. So we're not approving how much money he's paying the physicians. We're just approving the assets or liabilities or anything else like that. I think the biggest thing that's going to make this acquisition easy is that we own the building. All we're buying is, like Joe keeps saying, desks and chairs and computers. That's it. And I really wanted to make sure that we were clear. We're not buying a practice. We're just buying the assets that are inside. We're not buying a customer base at all either. We're just that the physicians close their practice and they come to work for us. So it's real simple and clean. Is that correct? Am I saying that correctly? Yeah, I just want to make sure. Chris, are you completely understand that?
Yeah, I guess the devil's advocate there is, what is stopping us from opening a practice that does this today?
What is stopping us from that?
Is anything stopping us? I'll put it that way.
So we opened up orthopedics, Chris.
No, I understand that, Kenny. I'm just saying, from the perspective of primary care in our community, there's nothing that we the board is going to receive in terms of I guess negative feedback from the community that something isn't being done appropriately.
I think his question is, could we open family practices today, irregardless of the purchase? I mean, if there's no, because we have clinic spaces, we could hire doctors technically for them there. I think it's more of a
Correct.
political question.
I think that we could. I think we could. We could absolutely do that.
Okay.
Yes. Dr. Astor.
I don't see any political issues though, as a 30,000 foot viewer. Because it's hard to get doctors to move to small towns. These are well-respected physicians that are already here. It's such an easy transition. Especially as a foil with, the other single provider search, the big gorilla. So my suspicion is that this will be supported broadly, not 100%, but very broadly.
Yeah, since I wasn't going to say anything, but since Joe asked us explicitly, if our view was that he could just do this without board approval, I just wanted to say, I certainly think he can and should be managing this. But I'm grateful that he's always kept us informed, but I think has the ability. That's my view. The other thing I wanted to say is I'm so pleased to see this happening, and I'm so pleased to see this happening in such an organized, respectful way. I just think this has been handled very well. And I wanted to see something like this start developing ever since I've been on the board. So
I just want to say, Joe and I started talking about it sort of from the beginning, and I would say that I would agree that it's been well handled. All aspects, including the political aspects of this transaction, were considered with the intent that, and at our last joint conference, we talked about the practice purchases that had come in the past, and we were asked whether that was something that we would do, and both Joe and I assured them that Bartlett's goal is to be a safe landing space for those who wanted to remain in practice but felt that they couldn't continue under the circumstances that they were in. And I think it was heard, and so far I don't see that changing as assuming that the rest of the board is in agreement with this philosophy. I don't see that our philosophy is going to change anytime soon.
All right, so we have a suggested motion in the packet. Someone want to make the motion? You see it, Max? Can you read it?
Yeah, thanks. It.
I can increase the size if you need it.
Shelley won't do that. I think as a co-chair, I shouldn't make the motion.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be another member.
I move the Planning Committee and Finance and Audit Committee of Bartlett Regional Hospital approve the purchase of assets from family practice physicians in an amount not to exceed the pending asset valuation and move to the full board.
second.
A little bit of discussion. So the only discussion I want to say is I do want to see a number before, I think we should see a number. Deb, do you agree with that or no?
How about a not to exceed?
Yeah, I was just going to say not to exceed.
We fall under $500,000 and we're good. If we're over that, then you'll come back to us. Does that seem like a good cutoff?
So $500,000 plus or minus $100,000.
Let's call it 600,000. 600,000. You want to do that?
So we'll amend your motion to add.
I would like to amend the motion to add that if the valuation is over $6,000, we'll come back to discuss that with us. 600. I'm 6,000. Boy, you don't have any leeway.
Is there any more discussion on this?
I just want to say I support this 100%. I think this is the direction that Bartlett needs to continue moving in, having our own providers. Thank you.
All right, so no other discussion and no objections. We move this on to the full board.
I'd like to thank Alex. I mean, he's been great in helping move us forward, facilitating conversations. Just making us a choice and being a partner. That's appreciated. And I like to see it.
Thank you for being here in the last few years, and I'm excited for the next chapter of our lives.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's been a treat to work with the whole group and we're looking forward to it very much.
Please tell me he's most excited about working with me more.
Yes.
This is a little bit of a sea change. You know, we have stopped the acquisition of practice by another entity in town. Now we are a safe landing spot, as Joe said. And Alex did help because he could have family practice has very easily gone in a different direction. So it's a good direction. That's pretty exciting.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton. Get back on to old business. We're on 6A, project update. Jean.
Good afternoon. Before I jump into the project updates, I would like to introduce our project manager, Lisa Egan Lagerquist. I am retiring at the end of the month, and Lisa will be the interim lead for the architecture section at CBJ. She's also the project manager for the ED addition and renovation project. So anything related to architectural items, please reach out to her going forward. Lisa's been with us 7 years. Lisa, did you want to say anything real quick? Or
Hi, thanks. I look forward to, Jean has some big shoes to fill, but I'm looking forward to help out while I can until we get a new chief architect.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I'll jump right into the project updates now. I think you have those in your packet. I don't see them on the screen yet, but the ground floor asbestos abatement project, and another one that Lisa was the project management manager for, is wrapping up. There's some last details that need a permit related to the fire fire wall installation, and we hope to have that wrapped up by April 30th. The Wildflower Court fuel tank project they'll be mobilizing on site in late May to get going with that project. The Wildflower Court sidewalk and stair repairs, the bid date slipped a little bit. It did advertise today, so we should have bids in the first week of May on that. And then the life safety condition assessment, we're hoping to get that out on the street next week. And that's replacing the fire alarm at Wildflower Court. On the ED addition and renovation project, we've picked up with the CMAR selection process. We had the pre-proposal walkthrough with the shortlisted contractors on Monday through the ED, and they are preparing their written proposals, which are due April 29th. And given the assembly schedule, we are shooting to have somebody on by mid-June. And so our anticipated start date for construction is spring of 26, but that could potentially phase if the contractor that we bring on board has some recommended phasing plans to where we could start earlier, perhaps with part of the project. That's part of the benefit of having them on early. And then just the last projects, we're still trying to get the outage plan worked out for the surge protection project, and as to how that affects departments. And once we have that worked out, we'll be out on the street with that. Are there any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Jean? Jean, congratulations on retiring.
Can you?
Well, thank you.
Sorry,
Thank
Max.
you.
Maxon's got a question for you.
Yeah, Dean, congratulations. But I'm just curious on the construction management process. How's that going? I mean, maybe it's too early to say, because isn't this the first or second CMAR that CBJ has done?
It's at least the second one. I
Oh,
think
is
the
it?
first one was the SCADA software implementation for the Mendenhall wastewater treatment plant. And I know it's also being considered or moving forward with the gondola project, but that's got some challenges. I'm not the project manager on that one, but that's on pause at the moment. So yeah, it is new territory for us, but we've been thinking about this for a long time and feel that the city and borough needs to get with the times and start using these alternative public works methods that have been out there for about 20 years. I will say that the proposers are very experienced in this procurement method.
Yeah.
So we have that, and also our architectural firm, Architects Alaska, they say most of their hospital work is done with the CMAR approach or even design build. So we have a good team.
A follow-up. The shortlisted firms, the three, how did you get to that list of the shortlisted firms?
Well, we started that process last year when we were anticipating getting the certificate of need a year ago, because that's when we applied for it. We did a call for statement of qualifications. So there was an RFQ, and those were there was an evaluation panel that ranked and scored on the short list. We believe we had 4 proposers, and we shortlisted 3 of the 4.
Thank you.
Yes, I just
Welcome.
wanted, this is off topic and sorry to waste everyone's time, but I wanted to acknowledge Gene's outstanding performance playing the marimbas at the folk festival. I express my appreciation to that.
Thank you so much. If I could use you as a reference, because I'm still on probation with the marimba band, I might take you up on that.
I'm willing to give everyone who performed with marimbas a reference.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Any other questions for Gene? Lisa, you are correct. You got big shoes to fill. I hope you can perform at next year's Folk Fest. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank Gene. We've worked, it's been a long time since you've been coming to the planning committee meetings, and I wanted to thank you for all your assistance and your patience with us changing our mind a few times, and we will miss you.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to go to facility master plan and we're going to enjoy.
So based on the facility master plan, it was board approved, as everyone knows, last month. As we started going through this requisition, I put in a modification request to CBJ to get a exemption, either purchasing rules. And so when my read on it was professional services, including architecture, there was an exemption that could be requested and approved. My request was denied. And so we opened up a RFP process, so we moved through that. So unfortunately, we had to stop, take a pause, and start pulling more information. So that will close on the 23rd, and then right after that, we'll have a scoring and hopefully award. Sorry for, I mean, I thought it was allowable the way the process we're following.
Okay. Any questions about this for Joe? All right, well, I am going to, without any questions about that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to the co-chair here, Max, and for financial.
You keep going. You're doing a good job, Tim.
Actually, I cannot get anything up on my computer, so I can't see anything. So you're gonna have to do it next.
All right.
You got this.
I'm gonna turn it over to Chuck for his last finance committee update here. So Chuck, it's all yours.
Okay, I guess, so the first thing I'd like to do is introduce, we have a new controller now. Walking with me today, that she will be, during the time when we're looking for a new CFO, she'll be kind of the lead person in finance staff, and so they're ready to have an opportunity. Lisa Dumo. And she has, in her history, in her experience, she's worked at the controller level. She has also worked at the CFO level. So she brings some pretty strong experience with her to help us out.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to page 7. Page 7 and 8 is my narrative. I'm gonna read through that for you. You can read through that on your own. So let's move on to page 9. And we'll start out at the top at inpatient revenue. And as you can see, our inpatient revenue was below budget for the month of February. We'll see as we move forward. It's actually our inpatient revenue was actually only down 8.3% from the prior month and 10% from the 13-month average. But we have a built-in decline because we're talking about February. So 28 days instead of 30 or 31. So you've got a 10% decline that's built in already when we start the month. And so what we saw was med-surg census was down about 21%. MHU was actually the only inpatient area that the census actually increased during the month, and CCU was down 31%. So the revenues on the inpatient side have basically followed not only the number of days in the month, but also have followed the census during that period. In terms of our BOPS revenue and our physician revenue, you can see that physician revenue was down. Actually, physician revenue was up from budget. It actually was down from the prior month by about $500,000. And so same kind of thing was going on on the clinic side. Ophthalmology was down about 28%, anesthesia 21%, and ophthalmology 10%. So again, we're kind of following census. Going on to our contractual allowances, just about where it's been all year long. Our year-to-date averages, you can see it's 44.7, and we're at 44.2. A little bit lower than the history on the bad debt charity care side. Yeah, we're watching that closely. We've got a plan to get some of these deals operating on. That continues to be an area of focus. Other operating revenue, where we expect it to be running equal with the averages from the prior months. And again, that is primarily our income from the dietary area. So then let's move down to salaries and expenses.
Could you hold just 1 second there?
Yes, sir.
I just want to focus on a couple of things that I always focus on just because that's what I focus on. So the contractual allowance decrease out below budget, 41.9. I know we're a little bit high in the current month, but I'm looking at the year-to-date number. And then also the bad debt charity care number is lower than last year. And I always worry that we're understating those, especially in the improvement that we're seeing in our balance sheet for the receivable. Can you just talk to that, please?
So
You had this huge, maybe just to add on, you had a pretty significant decline in your net AR, right? And so I'm just trying to make sure that, we feel good about our contractual in light of the net AR changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I look at the contractual allowance that we're reporting, traditionally it's running, it's moving up and down, and honestly, this is our contractuals are so flat, they vary so little from month to month that there's not a lot to look at. But on the months where we see the variances, it's because of the mix of patient revenue that we're seeing during those periods. So more more government revenue, less commercial, more commercial, less government. And so we track it very closely. We've got a schedule that we look at every month where we're tracking the AOR by financial class and reserving on it accordingly. So I feel pretty comfortable about it. I think that on an annual basis, we need to do a look back and make sure that the percentages are all still in line. We haven't done that since I've been here. So kind of on my list of things to do as I leave, one of the things on my list is to make sure that I do a look back for 12 months, make sure that all those percentages are still.
That handoff to Elise then to getting her up to speed on this so that she can carry the ball with it.
She's been shadowing me quite a bit. So we're trying to make sure that it's a good handoff.
So you're taking this over.
Yeah, that's good. So then why is the charity care down? The bad debt charity?
So traditionally that follows with our self-pay revenue month to month. One thing that again is on my list, we have to make sure that we get the charity care patients identified and authorized to be written off to the appropriate category. That does make a difference on the cost report. So that needs to be an area of focus, and we'll make sure that's going on.
Okay.
I did not look at the February charity care specifically, so I can't answer you specifically, but generally speaking, it's got to be an area of focus.
And then the net decrease in the net AR number against prior month is just because cash collections have continued to improve. I mean, is it that simple?
It is, yeah, it is improvements in cash collection largely.
Okay. And driven by what? What's driving the fact that we're being more successful in cash flow? I mean, is that we're doing a better follow-up on denials? Are we, what's going on there?
I think you've got good leadership in that department. I think her monitors her KPIs in place. She's following very closely. And I think it's just that the oversight in that department, the leadership in that department is pretty strong.
Go ahead.
Okay. We're on to expenses, and what I would say about expenses is that in terms, especially in terms of salaries, wages, and benefits, you can see that they're below budget. They are trending exactly where they've been with respect to the fact that we had a 28-day month instead of a 31-day month. So no real surprises there. The same is really true of the other expenses as we walk down through we've had an ongoing issue with our budget on physician contracts throughout the year. That continues on, and it will continue until we get it into a new budget year. The things that fell out for me were and this is while my other operating expenses are below budget, they were significantly above trend. When I look back, some of the things that are impacting that trend is we had a small increase in travel expense in the month of February. We had a small increase in dues and subscriptions in February, largely quality dues, I believe. And then we had about an $11,000 increase in freight during the month. So those impacted our the other couple of line items that popped out to me were maintenance, repairs, and utilities. And you can see that we fell out in both of those areas. Utilities, our electric it was primarily fuel oil expense, the cost of fuel oil, as well as our electric expense was over budget by about $8,000. So those are the two areas in terms of utilities. In maintenance, probably the biggest component of maintenance has been the software cost, the implementation of new programs, and the maintenance of those programs. And it was the variance for the month of February was about $60,000 on software maintenance. So falling down, other non-operating income and expense, $358,000, and bottom line, again, that's positive at 141,000. And while not great, I think another thing that I can point out during the month of February is that we've continued to clean up our accruals and payables, and I think we're really square on all of our accruals and payables now, so we won't have any surprises going forward. Moving on to page 10. And I think let's skip page 10. So the conversation about the line items on page 10 are gonna match very close to the conversations that we just had. So let's go on to page 11 and talk about Wildflower Court. So the gross inpatient revenue of Wildflower Court in the month was $1.4 million. So exceeding budget as we have in the past. Net revenue at $1.2 million, leaving us at about $315,000. Again, they're in terms of their expenses, their salaries and wages, while over budget have tracked with prior months. Their contract labor, again, while over budget is tracked with prior months, and employee benefits then is a subset of that. Their other expenses are all tracking exactly where we thought they would. And again, they're showing profitability about $314,000, which again trends with the earlier part of the year. And at February 2025, their year-to-date net income is just over $3 million. Moving on to page 12, our ratios.
Next, can I ask one question before we move on about this? So, I know I'm asking the same redundant question over and over and over again. Why don't we budget for contract labor?
We do. And so kind of the two areas that you're budgeting are salaries and wages and contract labor. Okay, so you'll see you saw in 2026, we actually budgeted for the hospital and Wildflower Court consolidated about over $8 million of contract labor. So we're budgeting in both those areas for our staffing. We're budgeting the salaries and wages and contract labor. And as our salaries, as we add FTEs at the employee level, then we should see the contract labor numbers drop off. So there's a little bit of a balancing act going on there where, it's kind of one for one. If I hire someone as an employee, then I ought to see some of that contract labor drop off. But we did budget about $8 million for 2026.
So what was budgeted for 2025?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about, the zeros that are showing up in the
Yeah.
column.
Yeah, on Wildflower Court, I think we're going to say we budgeted Wildflower Court for those people being salaries and wages sitting on the contract. But at the same time, you can see we're over budget in both areas. But new business method at the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure, as most budgets are, there were some components that didn't go this way. So we're gonna shore it up for next year.
So, I mean, part of this is the fact that you were making some wild ass guesses when you were through the budget in February, March of 23 for,
January of 24.
it was just so early at the time, right? So I've been just paying a lot more for the wildflower court piece. I've been looking much more closely at just the prior comparatives. I mean, it just, we'll be able to hold their feet to the fire a lot more for FY26.
I know every single year I look at the budget and we never budget enough for contract labor at Bartlett. And then of course you see the zeros.
Yeah, you get rosy optimistics about, thinking it's gonna come down, right?
Always.
Yeah.
I'll make sure Sharon's got my phone number, and if I miss the budget next year, you guys can call me.
I'm not gonna bother you while you're out thinking.
But we budgeted actually significantly more contract labor in 2026.
I'm glad to hear that too. And then to hear the way that you can be condensing them together. It's good.
As you look at salaries and wages, it's driven by our census. So we've staffed that to accommodate a full load of wildfire. So our census is 56 this morning. And so we've had to, we opened up all the beds. So that's why we'll be increase in that.
Which is great. You see increase in revenue too, so.
And that's one of the questions that department heads always ask when they're preparing their budget. They're saying, well, what if our volumes increase and we need more people? Well, that's a pretty good trade-off. If volumes increase, I'm not going to bother you too much about hiring more people. So, okay, page 12, liquidity ratios. Where we are. Current ratios, a little bit higher than it was last quarter, it's 4.06. Days in accounts receivable, you can see have fallen some, 61.15. Still not probably where it needs to be, but we're making progress. Days in accounts payable, 18.95. We've thought lately about maybe stretching that out a little bit as well to give us to more closely match the net terms that we have with all of our vendors. Operating margin is 5.1, excess margin 6.2, EBITDA margin 11.5. I guess what I would point out there is they're all positive. That's what we're looking for. Activity ratios, 20.04, similar to 12 months. And debt to capitalization and debt to total operating revenue, still maintaining about 53. So I'd like those to be lower, but a lot of that has to do with the way we report our numbers with the city. Okay, moving on to page 13. I think let's go on to 14 since 14 is consolidated. We've already talked about some of this, but in comparison to some of the trends, you can see the inpatient revenue. It's about 10.1% below trend again. Censuses were down 8 a month, and however, noteworthy is that the MHU census was actually up 20%. It's down from prior month by 8.3%. We got about a 10% flooding because of the number of days. So really trending about where we thought about where it's been. Outpatient revenue, variances on the outpatient revenue are down anywhere from 1 to 2%, with the exception of PT and speech, which both had positive variances. We talked about the drop in physician revenue with ophthalmology, anesthesia, and orthopedics off. So lower volumes there. Decrease from the prior month of about $500,000. Contractual allowances, again, you can see, our year to date or our 13 month average is about 42%, 42.5. So very close there, to where we've been. As we talked about a little bit down on charity care about that. And, net revenue, net patient revenue about 11% below, the prior month and 9% below 13 month trend. So still at that 28-day month, about where we should be. Salaries and wages, again, about 12 to 13% off the prior month, about 8% off the 13-month average. So again, trending with prior months, no big surprises. And then down to other expenses. The standouts again, as compared to prior month and 13-month average are the areas of utilities, maintenance, and other operating expenses. And those are related to the things we talked about, the software expenses and some of the smaller things, freight travel and dues. Page.
If we could just, I just thought of a question I meant to bring up earlier about the allocation for overhead to wildfire court for FY26 in the budget. We'll be allocating overhead, so we get on the actuals, so we get a little bit better picture of really how Bartlett Wildfire Court is performing.
We should certainly do that. We did not budget it that way, but
As we close out the cost report and get a good allocation methodology, we could build something into a spreadsheet. It'd be for presentation purposes, because we don't actually do it on our books, but we can post it.
Why not do it on your books? I mean, for internal measurement, you would want to have some sort of way to.
You have to reverse it every month, because when you file all your financial with the cost report, you don't want to be doing allocations that they'll be redoing.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It just, when you look at the numbers, especially when we're presenting, maybe one way to do it is to not present Bartlett separate from the consolidated, do
If you're going
consolidated.
to do consolidated at this point, we've showed, you get back to just a consolidated and do a single entity too.
Yeah, it might be nice to see an operating revenue for wildfire court going forward, but it makes, because Bartlett is carrying all of the overhead for wildfire court, it makes it look not great.
Yeah.
Right.
Overperformance.
And so one way or another, we need to, I think that is an improvement in reporting I'd like to see. One way, either, and I'm not opposed to necessarily not reporting Bartlett separately, although it's nice to see. I'd like to see it so that it has some sort of allocation credit for the overhead that's getting put on wildfire court's books so that, we can monitor that somehow.
I'm with you. Would you be open to moving to consolidated and then the quarterly we can do a breakout for wildfire court?
Yeah, I
I
think
just go in.
Yeah.
I say that because then we'll file the cost reports. My hope is to allocate more costs for this base year than we did last year.
that works for me. Some sort of, maybe just consolidated on a monthly basis and then do the breakout quarterly. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, page 15 is balance sheet. See on the balance sheet that very little variation in cash from month to month, but fairly large variance from cash prior year. As we talked about earlier, we've got our net patient AR continues to fall as our days in AR continue to fall. Other receivables, I did want to point out, other receivables are falling. That's normal amortization of receivables that are on the books. No change in the current month in CIP funding. 60. Property equipment, no significant change where we think we ought to be. A few small additions, but most of the change there is related to light depreciation. Coming down to total assets of 169 million for the month. Moving on to liabilities. See again, not payroll and accrued liabilities, we know move up and down with the timing of the month. I think we're doing a lot better job, as I said, getting our payables and accrued expenses in place. So see the drop in accounts payable and accrued expenses. Most of the other areas are the same. We did make a $30,000 bond payment, which came out of our notes payable, so you can see that reduction there. Then working down through long-term liabilities for bonds. And fund balance of 79 million, bringing it again to 169 million. Assets and not a lot happening in the balance sheet, but I'm happy to entertain any questions that you have.
I guess I just have a discussion item I'd like to put on the table about, this notion of the board designated cash line that is, I'm not sure I've got a lot of understanding of what flows into that. And, getting to the point, Joe and I had a conversation about it, calculating some sort of, reserve that we needed for capital replacement is potentially a way to look at, a fund balance reserve kind of target, right?
Yeah.
And I think it'd be a good exercise for us to go through to kind of understand, okay, we've got 117 days of cash that we have now. And as we move through this facility planning process that we're going to go through, we'll have a kind of target need of what we need to do for asset replacement, right?
Ideally, there's nothing, so you kind of project out what you need for cash flow in the future.
Yeah. I'd like to start over with that board designated cash. I'd like to come up with a kind of a bottom up basis of what we think needs to be in that number. And we could either do it as a cash number or you could do it as a reserve number, right? I mean, we could set aside that way too,
There are Medicare rules that dictate how much we can move into this. So what this does is it sets aside any interest earned on these monies that are deferred, do not offset our interest expense. So it increases our costs. So some of this is done for Medicare cost reporting. I understand what you're saying, but this is governed by Medicare and benefits our reimbursement.
That's 16.9 million.
Yes, basically everything that flows into it is our monthly depreciation. So all our depreciation flows into that fund, and that's what Medicare allows. So that'd be your max. That's as fast as that account can grow.
And then, so what you're doing is you're bifurcating interest income based on the allocation of.
Yeah, so at the end of the year, during the cost report, they say you were interest, this is your normal interest, this is your deferred. We're not gonna offset with this money. You just offset with this.
Okay, so that's fun. And let's do it on the credit side. Let's do it on the fund balance side. I mean, some sort of notion of, what do we need? And the reason I'm bringing this up is that when you look at the number by itself, $80 million looks like a ton of fund balance, right? And when you back off, a starting point on that would be to back away net investment capital assets, right? So you would say total fixed assets less debt for those capital assets would be a separate line for line 32 that would give us a little bit better sense of what our non-capital related fund balance is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but that is an understatement of what we should have in there because the capital replacement side is so much more.
Yeah.
Right. And so the second step of here's what our net investment is amounts that we expect of our existing fund balance to reinvest in new capital amounts, which would tie back to this facility plan.
Sure, you hopefully have a 5-year capital replacement plan and cash flow based on estimates.
Now that we're stabilized, I mean, we're stabilized financially, right? And we're kind of starting to move forward again. And we really need to have some certainty around what we're going to do to reduce that average age of plan. And the way that we do that, I think, is that we identify fund balance that we're setting aside for those capital replacement needs, right? So I guess I just would look at, that's a question I'm posing to you. Can we get to that so that we can build something into our financial?
That would be my goal as well too, because as you were in the budget meetings, people in the city starts asking about how much fund balance we do need. I want to make sure we're investing in our facilities. So the fact we're sitting here with a pot of cash.
Christine made my point. And that was when she brought that up, I was kind of glad because that was what the reason I brought it up with you is for that very reason to say, okay, we have this, but of this amount a huge amount of it's already invested in capital assets. And of the rest, we've got to have, we know that we've got this capital replacement stuff that we have to do for all the, the needs, putting a dollar amount, the board sets that aside into a capital replacement reserve, right? And then we're off to the races, right?
Then we've got a third line for additional designated cash. It's not our funded depreciation above and beyond or something like that. And then we start putting it aside. My favorite with the facility master plan is they're going to come back with 100 million construction needs.
Well, and
it's prioritization and making plans around that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those things always will come back and say you have to replace everything in the hospital, but it's a matter of phasing, it's here's what we got in the next 1 year, 3 year. There's condo associations, there's tons of literature and gap out there about how you set that stuff up. And I think even the healthcare audit guide has got some stuff about that too. But I really like to build that into our financials so that the board, so that we can see, here's how we're, we put aside the next 2 years or the next 3 or 4 years, or whatever, of fund balance for capital purposes. And it could be that you drive your undesignated amounts, because these are internal financials, and it becomes a negative number potentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we start doing it through the budget process or appropriations, you move it down to line number 9 too. Use that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, to me, it seems a lot cleaner to do it in the fund balance side, right? Because cash is current amounts that you have. Fund balance takes into account your fixed assets, net of debt, and what you want to do going forward that you don't necessarily have now. So maybe this is something we can start with the new fiscal year.
Well,
July 1. Well, except for the study one.
We won't have a study done. So as we go through that planning,
Go through the study.
strategic planning, and that's be the point, maybe we implement it January 1st next year.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
my,
I mean, you could start breaking out the fund balance, so July 1, and then we'll just have better clarity around what the needs are once the fiscal plans or the facility is done, right?
we can chat more about this and try to lay it out.
Thank you.
Okay, I got it noted. We'll get a plan together.
Thank you.
Okay, page 16. Is our, I think there's a lot more to talk about in terms of the balance sheet and see where page 17 is our volumes. See if you're looking at the page 17 that medical surgical volume month over month was down 22%. Mental health volume was actually the one that was up 19%. Critical care down 31%. Metrics was down 7.5%. And newborn nursery was down about 16%. So shortfall, some of which related to the number of days in a month, but some of which just related to general volume. On to page 17. Page 18. Patient volumes. Again, high points. PT increased month over month about 13.5%. Speech therapy increased month over month by about 29%. And all the others, all the other areas, all the departments declined month over month, anywhere from 2.5% to 14%. Page 19 is Wildflower Fort patient days. Down in February, only because of the number of days in the month. They've maintained a fairly high census in the mid to upper 50s.
We had a second line that has average daily census.
Yeah,
That really tells the story.
Okay, yes, sir. I can do that.
Yeah, so on an annualized run up, if you take that, turn it into a 31-day month, that's 1584.
Flattens it out, yep.
Yeah, but I also suggest that we don't start on zero because that really hides the variation from month to month. If we started that
Move scale,
slightly below where the trend line is, you'd be able to see the variation.
good idea. Maybe start like 1200 or something like that.
You know, whatever would be appropriate. So we can do that.
Yeah, you could just put ADC in the chart and then have the totals down below, and then the average daily census would be a more narrow band for the chart too,
Is that applicable to our inpatient chart as well?
It probably would be.
Page 20 is a breakout of home health and hospice, and Wildflower Court. We already looked at Wildflower Court, but you can see, home health for the month, had gross revenue of 58,000. Hospice 44,000. The applicable contractual allowances, getting us net revenue, home health 73, and net revenue in hospice just under 16,000. Operating expenses 86 and 42, bringing us to net income. Home health for the month -13, hospice for the month 7. Recognizing that 17 home health was pushed by the negative contractual allowance, giving us a total of the two $40,000 loss for the month. Year-to-date basis, about 325,000.
You know what I'm going to bring up here, right?
I know, he did it. So I actually have done,
Did 4 years, not 5, but I actually
Fourth grade.
did a projection out into the future. I forgot to get it on the agenda, but it's available to you. I'm happy to email it to anyone.
Would you mind sending that to the finance committee? And then we can all just, you can email that to the finance committee.
it's ECC.
Okay. And that way, anybody can ask you questions about it. And then maybe this at the board meeting would be okay if we set aside just a few minutes for him to go through that plan. Because I think it's it was a board action to say that we're going to set this 5-year plan in place to get Wildflower Court on its feet. So maybe the update of that plan would be worthy for, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but maybe just as much as anything else to let the stakeholders know that it's a focus area for us and we're working on that, right? Is that good? You know that?
Yeah, I would put it not as under committee meetings and notes, but an old business or something like.
Not under Joe's report.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Check and speak to it there.
Yeah.
That you good with that?
Yeah, we didn't touch it. Just get submitted to the meetings, we're gonna add to the agenda. That it's due by. Yeah, an hour ago.
Good thing we're here because you can extend that deadline, huh? So what does it show 4 years from now?
Not significantly different than what we're seeing now. It's generically speaking, I don't think this varies from other hospitals that are trying to do the same thing. Generically speaking, it's a loser. It is, in my mind, it's impossible to increase the volume enough to make your net income positive, because as you increase the volume, you're increasing staff ratioly. So the ratios always come out negative.
What about if I could just respond to that real quickly, and a big part of that is that the exercise, the reason to go through that exercise and to have that and to feel and to understand what our net revenues are is to be able to communicate to the community foundation and others what we think we need for revenue to make that thing wash, right?
And he has the CBJ appropriation plus the estimate for those donations in this.
Yeah, we'll put it in.
Great, I'll look forward to seeing it.
Happy to shoot.
Sorry, Kenny, you-
I just want to know, rebasing, is that you're going to be able to rebase that too? To-
That's not one of those services.
That's just for.
It's not,
Wildflower
Just
Court
Wildflower.
Hospital. Those are the ones that we.
right, so that,
yeah, it's just you get, there's a fee structure that the state and fed set, you get paid that rate.
we just can't. I thought there's possibility with rural communities that we could get higher rate than that. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's a nice thought.
You know, like the
That's
federal,
why everybody's getting out of the business because it's not there.
Yeah.
the feds like to increase it by 2.6%.
Yeah.
Fee schedule, where our costs are going 5.
I just thought during an acquisition period, we were gonna be able to rebase. It's just for services different than this, correct? Maybe I'm not understanding this correctly.
No, you don't, those costs, that's not part of the cost pool that sets the rates for the hospital. Those rates are fee for service rates that are just independent of how we get our reimbursement. Is that a fair way to?
Yeah.
Summarize?
From Medicare's perspective, it's a different organization. Right. They have a different number, they have different surveys, completely different entity.
I'll ask you more questions off.
So page 21 is FTEs. So having done a fair amount of research recently, because one of the other things that I'm trying to get completed is to get a productivity baseline set up and working on pulling, how to pull FTEs by department and what standards to use for activity. And as I've done that, what I found is that the schedule that you're looking at now is total FTEs, not productive FTEs. Okay, so I'll give you a little flavor. It's for the month of February. The total FTEs is 583. The productive FTEs is 533. So a difference of about 50 FTEs. Go to the month of March. The total FTEs is 586. Your productive FTEs is 522. So about a difference of about 66. So as we move into the future, the goal is to be able to show both productive and non-productive FTEs on these schedules so that you can see both components. And then as a management team, we'll use those productive FTEs to set productivity standards for the departments.
The low point in this graph is when we transitioned to UKG's time and attendance. So we had a different tool from pre the low point and post the low point. So I think that's the problem too. So
Sorry, it's driving.
now, once we get into UKG Pro and start doing all our pay, actually, we can probably do that of our current system is we can pull worked hours, productive versus non-productive on a month to date report. It's going to be much more accurate. So we can start working back. We'll never be able to go past that low point though. We can only kind of report forward from there.
Your implementation date.
Yeah.
But why is it going up? I mean, I get the fact that we're on UKG now, but by itself, you still have like 4 or 5 months now where it's trending up, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's really trending up. I think it's the system. There's some people that still exist and they're not getting cleaned out fast enough, so it adds to our total. That's my assumption. And so when we need to get back to actually productive worked hours, how many hours it takes with people in the facility, use that as a baseline.
Okay. So let's dump this chart if it's meaningless.
Consider it done to a rebuild and come back in a few months and we have a new tool that really shows where we're at.
Okay.
It shouldn't take a few months. I should have a good cut at it before.
I always said a few months so we have a bigger data slice, because if not, the chart's gonna be short, a couple months.
Yeah, starting from a couple months is okay too, right? But I guess the brass tacks for me at least is that you still are meeting, your FTE committee is still meeting weekly.
Yes, we do.
And you're still going through that same iterative process of we have somebody leaving and we're going to replace that person. I mean, that's still on the table. That's active.
Yep.
So Joe, sorry.
Go ahead.
So Joe, what you're saying is that 640 FTEs right now you believe that certain percentage of them just don't even belong in the system?
If you look at salaries and wages, it's been flat over the last few months.
Yeah.
Increase of this magnitude would assure them the dollars.
Right. And that's where the disconnect is.
Yeah, that's right.
Dollars are
I'm
down.
mistrusting something.
I totally agree with that. It's gonna be this true.
It is nice to see contractual versus employment. You know, if we can maintain that somehow, that's a good kind of thing to see. You know,
Yeah, we continue to.
that's striving towards the full full employment thing, right?
Yeah, and again, too, Chuck saying productive FTEs versus non-productive FTEs, I'm sorry, I just don't understand that. Does that mean that non-productive FTEs aren't working?
So,
Keep going in here.
in any pay period, there are employees who are getting paid for worked hours and also employees who are getting paid for FMLA, for vacation time, for
Education.
other kinds of leave, for other kinds of
Especially, all that stuff gets excluded.
that are not related to working on the patient on the floor. And so we separate the two. So it's so that we can make some sort of a management call about, whether the number of people that we have working is appropriate or not.
And it's not patient service versus non-patient service either, because you'd be a productive FTE for every hour you're sitting at your chair desk, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really worked versus not worked.
Vacations, FMA.
Right.
To share another example, that would be, we have a lot of people that work casually for us. Those folks are budgeted at a 0.2 FTE, but they might not have worked for a month or 2 months. They only are going to work, I think it's 2 shifts every 3 months in order to maintain their casual status. So that wouldn't be reflected in this one.
I think Joe really kind of summed it up that salaries and everything are staying stable. If they weren't, we'd be seeing.
Well, I guess we set aside the next slide as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying the same applies to wildflower food, not as significantly as the other. So that concludes my report for the day. Happy to answer any more questions or have any more discussion that you guys like to have.
Well, Chuck, I just want to say we really have enjoyed your time here, and thank you very much you put in a ton of hard work on budget, on GL related stuff, on getting the implementation done and rolled out, and we really appreciate greatly the work you've done.
So let's have that discussion. Thank you very much. The NetSuite implementation is complete. We're live as of 4/1. The month of April has been a month where we're still tweaking the system to make it do some of the things that we needed to do and things that we didn't see when but largely it's working well for us and we're moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item, committee comments and questions. Anything around the table? Nope. So this will be the last time we have combined committee, right? We're going back to regular, breaking these things out next month. Yeah.
This actually works really good. Why should we?
You guys,
Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Max?
Well, you planning committee people kind of long and drawn out. You're not like we finance people are.
Yes.
I would say that once we get rolling on the facility master plan, and some of those other things that, I think you're right about that. The amount of time that the planning committee is going to take up will be different than.
Well, they're inherently different functions, but I think it's healthy to keep them separated. So we back to, I mean, there was a reason we did it. I think we're all good with that, but I think we should just go back to it. Starting with May.
Works for me. Gonna miss you, Max.
We're adjourned.
You get Lisa. I listen to you.